All right, so today we're going deep on something pretty close to home, I think, for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely.
A potential energy standoff, you could say,
Yeah, definitely a standoff.
between Ontario and the U.S. And this is all stemming from some pretty strong statements coming from Ontario's premier recently,
Yeah.
basically saying that if this trade war that's been brewing keeps heating up, they might just cut off electricity to the U.S.
Right.
And, you've probably seen the headlines,
Definitely.
probably wondering what it all means.
Yeah.
What does it mean for me?
Right.
Well, that's what we're going to break down today.
Absolutely.
So the premier really didn't mince words. The phrase that kind of jumped out at me was shut off electricity completely.
Yeah, that was pretty striking language for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's not just tough talk, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, what would that actually look like if it happened?
Well, it's a pretty big deal because Ontario is kind of like the battery backup for a lot of U.S. states.
Really?
Yeah, especially during those peak times, when everyone's blasting their AC. Ah. Oh.
And cutting off that supply would be, to say the least disruptive.
Yeah.
Imagine like rolling blackouts across several states when they need power the most.
Okay, so not just an empty threat then.
No, not really.
But, I mean, surely there are agreements in place to prevent something like that, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're right. There are agreements like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Right.
And there are whole sections dedicated specifically to energy trade.
Okay.
So Ontario can't just flip a switch like that
Right.
without facing some serious legal consequences.
Yeah.
Not to mention the economic fallout, too.
Right.
This would hurt Ontario, too, probably even more than the U.S.
So more of a power play then, just to show that they're serious.
Exactly. It's what you call resource nationalism,
Okay.
where a country uses its key resources.
In this case, energy.
Right, exactly. Like they're holding all the best cards in a poker game.
Okay, so resource nationalism, check.
But what does this whole situation actually mean for me? Like how could this energy dispute potentially hit my wallet or impact my life?
Well, think about it like this. If energy can be weaponized like this, what's next? What other resources could be used as leverage in these trade wars?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because you rely on this complex web of global supply chains for everything, from the food you eat to the technology you use.
Yeah.
What happens when those become bargaining chips?
Right.
So this Ontario situation is kind of like a wake-up call,
Yeah.
A little glimpse into a future where these kinds of disputes could disrupt your life in ways you might not even imagine right now.
You're making me think about my morning coffee. What if coffee beans suddenly became a bargaining chip?
Right,
Not
exactly.
that far-fetched, is it?
Not really, and that's the point.
Okay.
This specific dispute between Ontario and the U.S., it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
We need to be thinking about the bigger picture here, the growing trend of protectionism,
Right.
where countries are looking inward more and more,
Yeah.
prioritizing their own interests, even if it means harming global trade and cooperation.
Okay, so what's the takeaway here? What should we be watching for?
Well, the big takeaway is that the world's getting more complex, more interconnected,
Right.
and unfortunately more volatile.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of these power dynamics, these potential pressure points,
Yeah.
whether it's energy, food technology, or anything else we rely on.
Okay.
Knowledge is power, as they say,
Mhm.
and understanding these trends is crucial for navigating an increasingly uncertain future.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, just remember, Ontario's threat might be a bluff, but it really exposes a very real vulnerability
Definitely.
in our interconnected world. Keep your eyes open and keep asking questions.
Yeah, good advice.
This is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation.
For sure.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.